Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. So I thought today we'd take some time and look at some community #AskEck questions. Just a reminder, if you've got something you'd like to see me cover in a video, leave it in the comments with the #AskEck. Starting off today, we have Seamass Joan, who says, are there any BS ships you can think of in the Star Wars universe? Something a wickedly rich dude would buy to show off, but effectively useless in any other context. Basically, do you think Star Wars has its own version of the Cybertruck? And no, there's no ship in Star Wars which is as bad as the Cybertruck. There are certainly some vessels like the TIE Wing or other uglies which are kind of awful, but are usually made out of necessity in the case of uglies because you only have a few spare parts lying around and you just need to make something that can fly. Star Wars does, however, have an entire class of ships known quite simply as yachts. Presumably, Star Wars has its own version of yacht rock, maybe called Yacht Jizz, based on the music. But in Solo, for example, we see Dryden Voss's vessel, the First Light. It's incredibly impressive and large, but it doesn't seem to be really functionally interesting in any real way, but it's a showpiece for a criminal overlord, so, I mean, it fits. One thing kind of intrinsic to the Star Wars universe, though, is that it's a place for tinkerers. One of the most famous warships in the galaxy, the Millennium Falcon, had its early life as a freighter, and for sure, Dryden Voss's vessel could have been armed with a myriad of weapons. And in fact, there were several famous yachts which served quite effectively in combat roles, or at least quasi-combat roles. In Star Wars Legends, and also canon by the way, Lando Calrissian's most famous personal starship is the Lady Luck, a Soro sub yacht. Like the Millennium Falcon, despite the Lady Luck's otherwise innocent looks, the vessel was heavily outfitted for combat, with 5 retractable laser cannons, heavy deflector shields, and just an incredibly impressive engine array. Mara Jade also had 3 yachts of her own, at least three that I can think of. The first and probably the most famous one was the Jade's Fire. It was also a Soro sub yacht, just like Lando's, and it was also heavily tricked out. For someone who had spent her entire time basically in servitude, the Fire was the physical embodiment of freedom for Mara Jade. It flew in several battles, but most famously was sacrificed on Nirwan as Mara and Luke tried to escape the Hand of Thrawn. After the Fire, there was for a short time the Saber, but more famously, the Jade Shadow. This was one of my favorite looking yachts in all of Star Wars. Mara used it throughout the Yuuzhan Vong War and beyond, and it served not only her, but also her husband's new Jedi Order. It was very, very fast and very deadly. For comparison, we can look at Naboo yachts. Again, these were status symbols, which is appropriate considering they were often used as diplomatic vessels, but weren't particularly safe or functional other than having great hyperdrives and engines. They were comfortable. Alright, the next question comes from GBob96, and I'm really happy he asked this one. Hey there, what do you think about people adapting Legends novels material directly into movies or TVs? For example, a Darth Plagueis movie released with the Legends banner. I know I've talked about this before, so some of you are probably rolling your eyes already, knowing what I'm about to say, but for me, there's a pretty clear example of what Star Wars could do here. They should look at the DC animated series, which were often standalone, sometimes not. For example, The Killing Joke, which were pretty successful and told, I think, in a cost-effective way. I think Star Wars could make really good money by animating these Legends series in a similar quality with voice actors consistent across the media, and I don't think you'd really have to worry about fans confusing, the Legend stories with the new continuity that they're also telling in TV, because you could simply call it Star Wars Legends. For example, you could have Star Wars Legends Heir to the Empire. You could do all 3 novels of that series, and then you could also do I, Jedi, for example, as a more standalone story. I honestly think it's a really good idea. I think it would make a ton of money. I guess for Disney, the question is, would it drive new subscribers to Disney Plus, which unfortunately seems to be the central thought right now, and I don't know. All right, this is an interesting one as well. This comes from the Pro People, and it's kind of tough because I don't have a ton of specific examples to point to, but he asks, we always talk about great Imperial fleet commanders like Thrawn or Piet or whoever, but how good is Vader as a fleet commander? I mean, we definitely see in the Clone Wars that Anakin is quite adept at commanding military forces. I mean, he makes mistakes, but we see at the Battle of Ryloth, for example, that he can be quite creative even if it involves war crimes. My feeling about Vader, though, not Anakin, is he's lost any sort of interest in fleet commanding. We see when Vader has Death Squadron that he uses it as a cudgel when it comes to actually planning the attack on Hoth. He's not so much interested in the details, and he has overwhelming force anyway. He just has his purpose, hunting Luke Skywalker, and he wants to do that. That's sort of the thing about Vader. He wouldn't have frequently been put in positions where the actual tactics of a battle are super important. He always had a crap load of Star Destroyers. He was later given Death Squadron, including a Super Star Destroyer. His main concern was actually getting the rebels into position and tracking them down, which, as we see in the movies and in Star Wars Rebels, he seems to be pretty effective at. I mean, he's got obviously incredible force abilities. He's got a really good kind of BS detector. But yeah, I don't think Fleet Command was something that Darth Vader in his suit years was really cut out for. Although, if he wanted to, I'm sure he would have been great. All right, so the final question of today comes from GC6096, who says, can you do a video on the Corellian Crisis? Yeah, I probably can do one, but in the meantime, if you look at my video I did on the post-Endor conflicts in the Star Wars galaxy, even just search up Eckhart's Ladder Corellian Crisis, it will show up, and I've got a few minutes dedicated to it there. For those who don't know, the Corellian Crisis comes, I assume he's talking about this specific Corellian Crisis, it could be too, from the Corellian trilogy. Corellia is obviously a very famous, not just planet, but system in Star Wars. It's also home to Centerpoint Station, which is, in reality, a massively powerful gravity-based superweapon. The planets of the Corellian system also had their own sort of mini Centerpoint Station, gravity repulsors. Anyway, Corellia is always a bit of an ornery system, and a group called the Triad, I believe, basically uses some of the pre-existing societal fractures to try to gain control of the system, that is. Remember that Corellia was a New Republic system, even though it was more independent than many. Centerpoint Station, that was really the most unique aspect of the Corellian trilogy and the conflict as a whole. It was used to generate a massive interdiction field across the entire system, which had two effects. For one, you couldn't really jump between planets, but also outside forces couldn't easily enter the system. The way it worked is that the interdiction field actually passed far beyond the reaches of the planet, so it stopped anyone from jumping in. They'd have to travel by sublight speed, which would take a very long time. The New Republic worked with the Bakurans to use a technology called the HIMS, I think, Hyperspace Inertial Momentum Sustainer. Anyway, the Triad is defeated, as are some of the smaller factions, including the Human League, led by, yes, this is real, Han Solo's cousin, Thraken Sal Solo. The thing is, the Corellians would get up to nonsense again. During the Yuuzhan Vong War, they forced the use of Centerpoint. It destroyed much of a Hapen fleet at Fondor. But the Corellians, who wanted more autonomy from the New Republic, also arguably led to the Second Galactic Civil War, which is a complete mess, and I've covered several times in other videos, but that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you'd like to see covered next. As always, if you have a question you'd really like to see answered, leave it in the comments with the hashtag AskEck. Till next time, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.